Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the matriarchs in the book of Genesis, the women that we read about in the book of Genesis at the same time we read about the patriarchs. And we're continuing our study of Sarah. So we talked about her, introduced her, the terms of her life on the road with Abraham. We talked about yesterday her agency in her domestic life and the way, and the way um, she herself was obeyed, and the way she demanded her way, but also her faith in God's plan, her never doubting God's plan, and her ability to imagine alternate ways God could keep his promise than the way that might be obvious to others. So there's that as well. Today, we want to talk about Sarah's faith and the promise of the child and the birth of the child that God has promised. And Sarah is 89 years old when she gets pregnant, 90 when Isaac is born. And of course, we know the event, Genesis chapter 18. They're encamped at the oak of Mamre, by the oaks of Mamre, and Abraham is sitting there and he sees travelers on the road. And this guy, who is so rich that he is respected by kings, so rich that he has his own personal army to keep him safe, this guy is so humble and hospitable to travelers on the road. And Hebrews mentions this event as well in Hebrews 13 and when telling us to be hospitable, because some have entertained angels unaware, and that's us. We might, and it's referring back to what happens in Genesis 18, because these travelers are the angels who will bring about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, or at least announce it and help Lot and his family escape, and God himself. And so they sit under the oak of Mamre there, and and Abraham himself prepares, the meat of the feast that he's going to offer these travelers, and Sarah is in the tent also preparing, to be hospitable to them and to present a meal to them, and so as they're there, God tells him that next year at this time Sarah will have a baby boy. They said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And he said, "She's in the tent." And he said, "I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, your wife shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent door, which was behind him. And Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. Sarah was past childbearing, as was Abraham. We're told this in Romans chapter 4, by the way. His body was as good as dead, and yet he had faith. Um, And the Lord said, and she said, she laughed to herself, saying, "After I have become old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also?" And the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I indeed bear a child when I am so old? Is anything too difficult for Yahweh? At the appointed time I will return to you, and this time next year Sarah will have a son." And Sarah denied it, saying, "I didn't laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "No, but you did laugh." Um, Sarah's joke is not at Yahweh's expense, it's at Abram's expense and her expense. That at this age of 89 and 99, they're going to be able to um, enjoy this part of their relationship at all. And that's funny to her. Um, and and God says, "Is anything impossible with God?" It is a lack of faith in God, because even though she's having a laugh at hers and her husband's expense, God had made a promise. And it was clear God was not going to keep the promise any other way but through them. And so she shouldn't have been surprised. And of course, Sarah has the fear of the Lord. I mean, she denies laughing, but God said, "No, you did laugh." And so when they have the son they're promised in chapter 21, The Lord remembered Sarah as he had said. Yahweh did for Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the appointed time of which God had spoken. And Abraham called the son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God commanded him. So the name Isaac, Itzhak, Itzhak is the Hebrew name, Isaac, Itzhak, or Yitzhak, and it is a word which means to laugh. In fact, it's onomatopoeia. I mean, that's probably what they sounded like when they laughed, you know. They probably uh, inhaled when they laughed and sounded like that when they laughed, but that's what it means. It means to laugh, and that's Isaac's name. And it celebrates this moment when Sarah laughed and God said, she said, I didn't laugh. And God said, no, you did laugh. It's to remember this moment when the promise was reiterated to them and now it's fulfilled in Isaac. Okay. We've got a little more to talk about Sarah next time. We'll pick up back in chapter 21 with verse 8. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the word.